Let's talk about problem solving, something we all probably try to do very frequently and something we all probably wish we could do a little bit better. There are four specific types of problem solving that I want to talk about, and they are very different not just in what they do, but also in how successful they are. So the very first is trial and error. This one isn't really that planned out. It doesn't really require a lot of processes in the brain. You think, I have a problem. There's an idea. I'll try it. And if it works, cool. And if not, I'll try something different. Sometimes you make adjustments to what you tried, sometimes you try a completely different path, but it's just trying different things, trying to figure out what works. Sometimes in life we have the privilege of being able to do that, but many times our problems require some urgency or some precision that trial and error really often is not the best approach for. College, for example. So the first is trial and error. The second has to do with algorithms. For you mathematical people or even people involved in social media, an algorithm is a very specific formula that combines information in a way that leads to the correct answer if there actually is one. So Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat have these algorithms where they look at what you click, they look at what you ignore, they look at what you block, and then they create this formula which ideally is supposed to lead to the perfect news feed. Social media algorithms are not as effective as psychological algorithms, because in psychology, when we say algorithm, we mean this is the exact specific formula to get to that solution. That sounds great, but sometimes we don't have access to the algorithm, or we may not yet have experienced it. So, if we don't just want to willy-nilly try things, or we don't have the exact perfect solution, we'll often engage in heuristics. And these are simple rules that are, in hopes, going to gear us towards the correct answer most of the time. So when you hear people say things like, well, a good rule of thumb is to do this, they're kind of admitting that that's not always the case. Or it's kind of like a disclaimer, like, well, most of the time this will work. But it's that little most of the time that is an out if it happens to be incorrect. So when you use these rules of thumb or these heuristics, there is an underlying acknowledgement that it's not always right. So that can be problematic in problem solving, like in college or at your job. But when we're trying to understand people and ourselves, sometimes these heuristics can cause a lot of problems because it's really similar, which we'll talk about later, to stereotyping. So a simple rule might be these people are like this. You're one of those people. You're probably like that. That's an example of a heuristic. Now, when you look back at evolutionary psychology, you think, hmm, those berries killed my brother. That looks like a berry that killed my brother. I bet that berry would kill my brother. That's the kind of thinking that an evolutionary psychologist would say is why stereotyping and these heuristics are built into our brains and our way of thinking. But they absolutely can be problematic in today's society. So just be wary of when people say a good rule of thumb or most of the time, because those are heuristics that are not always true. Probably the least tangible problem solving method that we'll talk about is insight. Insight is also called the aha moment, where you just kind of figure something out. And sometimes when we experience it, we just feel like we're really intelligent, like, wow, that came out of nowhere. Nobody's ever told me that. I came up with this totally new and original problem solving technique. But what it typically is you're recognizing parts of a problem and you're just combining them in a way that maybe you haven't seen before, or at least you don't remember having seen before. But it feels very magical, especially for people who have kind of a magical type of thinking. These aha insight moments can be really boosting for your self-esteem. Not to say they shouldn't be, because there is still some skill involved in identifying parts of a problem and then combining them to form a new solution. That's great, but there is a scientific explanation for it, and we call that insight. So, in terms of problem solving, make sure you know trial and error, algorithms, heuristics, and insight.